Nostalgia is a powerful thing. I mean, I've practically built an entire career on it over the last couple of years. It can inspire us, comfort us, and even shape who we become. But it can also trap us, convincing us that the past was simpler and better than it ever really was. When handled carefully, nostalgia becomes a foundation to build on, but when handled poorly, it becomes a cage. And a really great demonstration of that balance can be found in the Batman the Animated Series episode, Beware the Grey Ghost. On the surface, it's a love letter to old television heroes and childhood memories, but beneath that warmth lies a story about inspiration, legacy, and the danger of mistaking memory for meaning. Because in this episode, nostalgia doesn't just shape a hero, it also creates a villain. So the most obvious point of nostalgia comes in the character of the titular Grey Ghost. Casting Adam West as his voice does a lot of heavy lifting for those in the know. I've talked about this before in a video about Batman the Brave and the Bold's proto-Batbot, but this episode is the originator of West's nostalgia-driven role in Batman media. Originally, Bruce Timm and Andrea Romano discussed casting the voice actor of Space Ghost, Gary Owens, for the role, which would have made sense given how much BTAS's Batman resembled Space Ghost. But both executive producer Tom Ruegger and director Dan Reba suggested Adam West for the role, and the rest is history. There may be some of you watching this that aren't aware of Adam West's connection to Batman. Hard as that may be to believe, maybe you just know him from Family Guy. But in short, he played Batman in the 1960s show, which was so popular that West struggled to escape its shadow for decades afterwards. West was Tim, Ruegger and Reba's childhood Batman, so of course he should play the actor that inspired Batman, much in the same way that the real-world Adam West had inspired them, and this is a great example of nostalgic casting working. The thing about nostalgia is it can be a treacherous compass. Spend too much time thinking about what worked in the past and run the risk of treading old ground because it feels safe. Not so in Beware the Grey Ghost, because this nostalgic casting is additive. The premise of the episode is that Gotham is under siege from a mad bomber who holds the city to ransom. It turns out that the perpetrator is recreating crimes from the old TV show, The Grey Ghost, that also happened to inspire Bruce Wayne in his youth. This brings him into contact with the actor who played the hero, Simon Trent, who is down on his luck, incapable of getting cast in roles because people only see him as the old-fashioned costume hero. At its core, the episode has a powerful idea. Heroes do not appear out of thin air, they are inspired. Bruce Wayne did not become Batman in isolation. He grew up watching The Grey Ghost, absorbing the values of courage, decency and determination from a flickering television screen. And it is important to note that Batman's relationship with the Grey Ghost isn't treated as a passing childhood memory either. Deep within the Batcave, tucked among the trophies of a lifetime spent fighting crime, sits a small shrine to his hero, a Grey Ghost poster carefully preserved, alongside the memorabilia of a boy who once believed in something bigger than himself. It's a small detail, but an important one. Batman may have grown into something darker and more complicated than the heroes of old television, but he never discarded the ideals that first set him on that path, and he carries that inspiration with him for decades. Now, by casting Adam West, the show mirrors that fictional inspiration with a real one, adding a beautiful layer of meaning for those in the know. Like Batman, we too have a hero who should inspire us. That symmetry is what elevates the casting into meaningful fan service rather than hollow nostalgia. Likewise, the Grey Ghost's design mirrors pulp heroes that predated Batman, like the Shadow or Doc Savage, who inspired Batman co-creator Bob Kane. It's all very clever, and it could have so easily have fallen apart if they hadn't treated Trent so seriously. As I mentioned earlier, Trent's struggle closely echoes West's own history after the end of Batman, when his association with the Caped Crusader became both a blessing and a curse. Trent's frustration, bitterness, and ultimate reconciliation with his legacy carry an authenticity that only works because of who is delivering those lines. Without West, Simon Trent would be sympathetic, sure, but with West, he becomes personal. When Trent lashes out at his own memorabilia, it resonates as more than fiction. It feels like a confession from the past, reframed through animation. And when he ultimately embraces the Grey Ghost identity again, standing shoulder to shoulder with Batman, the moment feels like redemption, not only for Trent, but for West himself. Fan service often carries a reputation for being shallow, a quick nod meant to provoke applause without adding substance. I certainly have made that argument about other shows in the DCAU, like the decision to turn Richie Foley into the hero Gear in Static Shock, linked to in the info button, so add that to your watch later list if the subject interests you. But this episode demonstrates what fan service looks like when it serves the narrative. West's presence functions as narrative shorthand, instantly communicating history, legacy and affection without requiring lengthy exposition. The audience understands the Grey Ghost's importance before the character even takes action, simply because that voice carries decades of cultural memory. There is also a thematic elegance in how the episode resolves Simon Trent's arc. Many stories in Batman the Animated Series end with tragedy, regret or despair. Beware the Grey Ghost, however, ends in affirmation. As Bruce Wayne, Batman attends a signing with his childhood hero and expresses gratitude, acknowledging the role Trent played in shaping the man he became, and even goes as far as hinting to his secret identity. In doing so, the series symbolically thanks Adam West and, by extension, the earlier eras of Batman storytelling that made the modern character possible. This approach to nostalgia echoes how later series would treat West as a living emblem of legacy. Whether voicing figures of authority, inspiration, or outdated heroism, his casting repeatedly signalled continuity across generations of Batman media. Ultimately, Adam West's casting succeeds because it transforms fan service into storytelling oxygen. The episode breathes because of it. The Grey Ghost is not simply a tribute to an older version of Batman, he shows how every hero stands on the shoulders of the stories that came before. And when Bruce Wayne thanks Simon Trent, it feels less like dialogue and more like history speaking back to itself. Of course, there's a lot more going on in the episode. Something that many people don't realise is that the Mad Bomber, Ted Dymer, is modelled on and voiced by Bruce Timm. As well as being a funny bit of trivia, he also shows the dark side of nostalgia. Dymer feels a little like the comic book supervillain Toyman, who retreats into nostalgia to avoid harsh reality, although the version of him seen in Superman the Animated Series a few later was quite different, but that's a topic for a separate video. Dymer weaponizes the past, literal action figures from his childhood, all to fuel his insatiable thirst for memorabilia. It's funny that when Trent sells his collection to Dymer for rent money, Dymer is incredulous. He can't believe his luck, even if there isn't much demand for Grey Ghost merch in his toy store. Seminal writer Alan Moore argues that nostalgia becomes dangerous when it stops being fond remembrance and turns into a longing for a past polished into something simpler and kinder than it ever was. Dymer embodies that danger perfectly. He rebuilds the past piece by piece, building up his collection until it explodes in his hands. He was very clearly a fan of the series, and like Bruce Wayne, it was fundamental to his personality. But he took the wrong lessons from what he saw. Rather than trying to be a better person and doing the right thing, he identified with a villain from the show and replicated his scheme, using remote-controlled cars loaded with explosives to destroy buildings. He literally assumes the role of a villain, taking the same name, using the same props, all to do the same thing. Batman, meanwhile, took the core message of the Grey Ghost and made it his own, transforming inspiration into action rather than imitation. There's a very clear message there about toxic fandom and grown men obsessing over things from their childhood, and yes, Q remarks in the comments about my love for Batman the Animated Series, ha ha ha. But jokes aside, there really are fans of these shows that seem to be completely oblivious to the message they were trying to tell. I can't tell you how many people leave comments on my Lockup video saying that Lockup did nothing wrong, and that they wish there was a Lockup in the real world. I guess trying to drown a journalist because she mentioned that people find Poison Ivy attractive isn't a deal breaker for these people. But getting back to Dymer, he is ultimately not a huge threat. While he circles Batman with more of his explosive cars, Trent swings in through the window, knocking him over and ultimately causing the toy shop to explode. So there's an irony here. The actor who played the character who was so important to Dymer's life forces him to face reality. Seeing his life's work going up in smoke, all Dymer can do is drop to his knees and weep like a little boy. By the end of the episode, 3 very different relationships with the past stand side by side. Simon Trent learns to accept his legacy rather than resent it. Bruce Wayne shows how he transformed childhood admiration into something greater, carrying those early lessons forward into the man he becomes. Ted Dymer, meanwhile, loses himself entirely, mistaking imitation for inspiration until his world quite literally collapses around him. Each of them is shaped by nostalgia, but only one of them allows it to define him, and that is the brilliance of Beware Beware the Grey Ghost. It's not just about old television shows, vintage toys, and Batman meeting his childhood hero. At its core, what it's really about is what we choose to do with the stories that shaped us. Do we honour them by building something new, as Bruce Wayne did? Do we make peace with them, as Simon Trent finally does? Or do we cling to them so tightly that they stop being memories and start becoming prisons? This episode has a clear answer. Nostalgia, like any good story, works best when it moves us forward rather than keeping us trapped in reruns of the past. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time, I'll be back on Friday to talk about a villain from my recent Justice League poll, the incredibly adaptable Amazo. And next Monday, with the impending release of the Supergirl film, what better time is there to talk about the Superman the Animated Series two-parter, The Main Man? What, were you expecting something else? Hope to see you then.